Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson and welcome to another edition of Doorstep History, the show that brings to light the history that's right on your doorstep here in the Midlands. We have a rather interesting show for you this week with a broad range of subjects from the Industrial Revolution right through to the modern day, which is all right here in the heart of Great Britain. In today's show, we'll welcome back historian Andrew Lound, discussing how Birmingham and the Black Country coped with their new infrastructure during the Industrial Revolution. We speak to Chris Perry, who tells us about the importance of the Sutton Coalfield transmitter for the Midlands. And now we get underway as we hear from two of our TNT reporters, Koji Nixon and Ajwani Lindo, as they explore a little of the history, as well as getting themselves a sneaky look behind the scenes at the Birmingham Council House.
So, here we are in the council chamber. So, Phil, what's it all about?
Yes, this is the council chamber of Birmingham City Council, which the 120 councillors all meet once a month and debate various topics of interest to the council.
So this is where the Lord Mayor sits.
Come to speak about great stuff. Things about the future of our community.
Interesting things about the chamber.
This wood came from Riga in Latvia, and it's made of oak.
Number 2. These panels represent truth and justice.
Number 3. When it's full, there is room for 120 councillors. Number 4. The public gallery at the back holds 100 people.
When are you going to produce my taxes?
Number 5. This is where the journalists sit during the meetings. They used to sit up there.
Here we are by the clock tower. I wonder what it's like up there. There's only one way to find out.
So, let's go up with the help of Paul.
This first level is where we have the winding mechanisms for the clock, for the actual bells themselves. Yeah, just a bit. On this level, you can probably hear the mechanism going now. Through this door here, you can actually see the wires continuing up to the actual mechanism themselves. So here we have the actual main mechanism for the actual clock itself. It was actually refurbished in 1992, and a lot of it was automated, i.e. for to wind the chimes on and also to wind the actual cycle mechanism.
It's a fantastic piece of Victorian machinery that still works well today.
So that's the clock mechanism. Let's go up and look at the clock face. So, here we are, 159 steps later, at the clock face. So, Paul, what's up here?
We've got the 4 clock faces, and they're each controlled by the 4 mechanisms which you can see at the back of the clock. At the back of the face. You've actually got the main mechanism in the central part of the actual clock face itself, which actually controls the actual arms as they actually go on the hands itself. We can actually have a look at the actual face itself by opening up one of the panels. And if you look closely, you can actually see the hand actually move.
So, which way is Victoria Square?
Well, Victoria Square is actually on this face here. And then we've got Chamberlain Square on this face.
It's incredible to think that you can still go behind one of the 4 enormous clock faces.
So then, are we at the top yet?
Not quite, because we have actually got another 2 levels to see. So the next level will be, you've seen the clock face, you've seen the actual mechanism, so the next part that we're going to actually see is what the clock's actually been named after, which is Big Brum. What we have in the actual bell tower is the actual bell itself, known as Big Brum, which is that big bell just on the far side. And then the other bells surrounding it are the other bells which we call which give out the Cambridge chimes. We're about to go to the very top of the actual clock tower itself. You'll be able to see the view all around the city centre. Okay. So here we are at the actual top of the clock tower. Not a bad little view, is it?
The view from here is fantastic, and this was used as a vantage point in World War II. More on this in a later programme.
Getting up's the easy bit, now we have to get down.
Koji Nixon, TNT News at the clock tower.
An interesting look at the council house there from Koji, Ajwani and the TNT team, who will be bringing us a special look at Birmingham Racehorse in next week's show. On to local historian Andrew Lound now, who is an expert on the industry of the Midlands. Today he tells us all about how Birmingham and the Black Country managed to overcome the difficulties of mass transit during the Industrial Revolution, before the advent of the motor vehicle, and how this gave rise to the canals we see across the region today.
If we can take the clock back, say, to the middle of the 18th century, what can we see in the region here? One of the things we do see is the poor quality of the roads, for starters, and they're absolutely critical because we've got heavy wagons with very heavy horses transporting goods from the Black Country into Birmingham and to the surrounding areas as well. One of the reasons we ended up with a large canal network, that was absolutely centred on Birmingham and the Black Country, was because of the transport of heavy goods. The movement of coal, for instance, was absolutely vital. The movement of heavy metal, well, to transport these on roads is very difficult. The transportation of brittle goods, such as from the Staffordshire region where you've got pottery, absolutely vital that they don't get smashed going across the roads. So you have canals and they can gently move them across. So the canal network is brought up. And then as you run into the 19th century, you have this huge network of canals operating. So you've got canal people, and the canal folk on the boats themselves have created, because of this, their own almost like mini culture of canal life and canal people. Now, heavy wagons, they can cause really great problems. You have huge pieces of metal goods being transported, things like anchors, for instance, from Dudley. Well, huge char horses were needed to pull these wagons through the streets, and it just became completely impractical, which the oncoming of the railways solved one of the problems for that. And now you had what was called short transports. So you had huge horses on big wagons pulling goods to the local goods stations. And the railway companies then could transport these goods then to all corners of the United Kingdom. So what you had building up then in the region is in the areas in Dudley, the big huge area in Walsall, of course, is the huge goods areas where transportation was critical to move the items. So you had wagons transporting with big horses to the railway stations, transporting the goods by rail. It was a hive of activity through the whole region itself. If you were a child in the region, your life would have changed greatly. Children's lives changed vastly from the 18th century into the 19th century in this region. With the development of industry, children now were being used by their fathers to help them in their work. And this ended up as an official organised system. If we take an area like Soho Foundry, for instance, the famous foundry, you would have workers there being paid by the company. The company then would leave it up to the workers to decide how they organised their work, and they would bring their children in to help them out. And when the children reached a certain age, they would then become apprentices and then would carry out their apprenticeship work. And then when their apprenticeship work had been completed, they would go and fend out for themselves.
Now, we're just about to take a quick break, but before we go, I'd like to give you another question to ponder before the end of today's show. So, A huge chain of cinemas that are still around today opened in Perry Bar, Birmingham in 1930. And the building still survives to this day, though not in its original function. But which cinema chain am I talking about? If you think you know, please don't hesitate to contact me here at Big Centre TV by either Twitter at Big Centre TV, Facebook at Big Centre TV, or send an email to hello@bigcentre.tv. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Doorstep History here on Big Centre TV. With us now is Chris Perry, a television historian who specialises on the history of television here in the Midlands. This week is an extra special treat from Chris as he talks about how television came to the Midlands and also the importance of the Sutton Coldfield transmitter, which has been bringing programmes such as this one to your screens for a fair few years now.
Hello again. Do you remember last week when I was talking to you about television in its infancy in the Midlands, and I made reference to the Sutton Coldfield transmitter being on your doorstep? Well, Doorstep History is about the things that you can touch, the things that you can actually kind of go and see, and I'm going to talk a bit more today about the Sutton Coldfield transmitter. Now, you might think this makes me an incredibly sad person, and you're probably right that I know something about this transmitter. But it actually is really, really important to the area, and we should actually be really proud of it. So, it's worth me telling you a bit more about it. The transmitter itself is actually one of the tallest in Britain, believe it or not, and one of the tallest in Europe, and it's been around an awful long time. Broadcasting actually arrived in the Midlands on the 17th of December 1949, and that was only the second transmitter in Britain after the one at London. For those of you who are interested in a bit of kind of slightly wider national history, broadcasting had begun in 1936 down at Alexandra Palace, which is in London. And broadcasting went up until the kind of outbreak of war, and then it went off air during the Second World War, and it came back after the Second World War. And, certainly if you go even into something like Birmingham Library now and look at the Radio Times, you will see there's no reference in there to the fact there was any broadcasting in the Midlands at all. Because even once it started on the 17th of December 1949, the actual kind of newspapers and Radio Times was very slow to catch up and report that now Birmingham had its own transmitter when broadcasting came to the Midlands. Now, the transmitter we've got now is not the same as the one we had in 1949 in the sense that it's got taller, and they've changed it quite a lot because lots of things have changed about TV over the years. The first change was in 1983 when they made the decision to move away from 4 or 5 line television and move towards 625 line television permanently. But technology never stands still. And on the 21st of November 2011, they actually turned the Sutton Coldfield transmitter entirely digital. So basically all those old analogue signals disappeared and everything became digital. What that means in practice is that your mobile phone signals that you love as you sit there watching me now on your iPads and mobile phones, that all that bandwidth that you use is where the old analogue signals used to be, and that was all got rid of and given to mobile phone companies. And now TV is transmitted digitally instead. And that transmitter broadcasts all the way up to Stoke-on-Trent and all the way down to Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire. Now, Big Centre TV has a very small part of that. We have the part that covers Birmingham and Walsall and Wolverhampton and Sutton Coldfield and Solihull, but it actually covers a much bigger area. And I've never quite understood why, Big Centre TV doesn't go into, say, Coventry or Rugby and other areas like that, because it could, because it all comes from the same transmitter. But that's a question I can't answer because I'm not from the government and I didn't decide that. So what do they actually show? Well, that's a very interesting thing to think about, really. Now you'd expect to get from the Sutton Coldfield transmitter all those things, like BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, Big Centre TV. You also get all your radio stations, like Heart FM, Classic FM, Radio WM. They all come from there as well. Some of them used to come from other places, but gradually, one by one, they've all been concentrated into the same place. The same transmitter also, you know, serves to a certain extent much smaller organisations like the BBC Asian network as well. So it's a pretty comprehensive transmitter and does a really vitally important job. You know, if it wasn't there, you'd really struggle. And the Brierley Hill transmitter, which we also go out to, if you're watching us in Brierley Hill or Dudley or Stanbridge, that's what's called a relay transmitter. So it's not the main transmitter, it just picks up what Sutton Coldfield is doing and it boosts the signal for the Black Country because there's quite a lot of hills around there and lots of things get moved. So what was watched on the 17th of December 1949? Well, you know, sometimes when you look at where the BBC started, it's not very different to where local TV starts as well. According to my notes here from the Radio Times, television began at 8 o'clock in the Midlands in the evening, and the first 15 minutes, all of the country had to watch it. Whether you were in Scotland or in London, you all had to watch the first 15 minutes that said, "Welcome to the Midlands." And some of the clips that you're probably watching while I'm talking now come from that very same film that was shown at 8 o'clock in 1949. It's the exact same film that you've been watching this evening as well. So there's a little touch of history for you. The very first programme at 8:15 was called Stars in Your Eyes. And funnily enough, it was a programme where people like comedians, you know, would then come on and pretend to be singers and do variety acts. Now, where have I heard of that concept before? You'd have seen people like Stanley Holloway and people like Eric Robinson doing their kind of thing, really. That went through till 9:15 at night, and I kid you not, this is no coincidence. They showed ice hockey on the opening night of BBC in the Midlands. Now, Big Centre TV showed ice hockey on its opening night as well, and I was completely unaware of that coincidence. So that's not a bad omen, is it? If Big Centre TV is around in another 50, 60 years' time, just like the BBC is, I should be a pretty happy man. They're probably long gone and not around to see it anymore. But the ice hockey game was the Earls Court Rangers versus the Nottingham Panthers. So in those days, Solihull didn't have its own ice hockey team. Nottingham was the closest they could muster. Then at 9:45 there was the newsreel, brought by British Pathé, and then at 10 o'clock, and this shows how early TV was in its infancy, the 10 o'clock news, which was the final programme that evening, was in sound only. There were no pictures to it. So all you had was a black screen and just the voice talking over it instead. I wonder if that would have improved Bob Hall to make him look better or worse. Answers on a postcard from the viewers, please. So, the next time you see the Sutton Coldfield transmitter, you know, don't just take it for granted. Don't be disappointed just because it wipes out all the phone signals for all the houses living around it. Celebrate it. It's one of the greatest transmitters that Britain's actually got. And without it, not only would you not be able to get any you know, TV channels, you wouldn't get any radio channels either. So it's a really, really interesting piece of doorstep history.
Great stuff from Chris there. I had no idea that the transmitter worked for mobile phones too. Now, if you remember earlier, I asked which chain of cinemas first opened their doors in Perry Bar in 1930. The answer, of course, was Odeon. So, if you found that a little too easy, then I have more of a challenge as we wrap up this week's show. The Parnells shall play us out with a medley of television themes from the past few decades. And don't forget to send a message if you know a few. That's all from me, and I'll see you next time on Doorstep History.